Today, I will talk about one of the very important topics in English grammar, that is regarding the change of narration, or commonly known as direct and indirect speech. Let me tell you at the very outset that there will be a series of 7 to 8 lectures of half an hour duration each, in which I will try to cover all the concepts related to changing of the narration from direct speech to indirect speech. First of all, I will tell you about some of the very important rules that apply to the sentences while converting them from the direct narration to their corresponding indirect narration. And then I will tell you about the kinds of sentences, and later on, I will do some practice with the help of examples which would further clarify your concepts regarding the change of narration from direct speech into indirect speech. So get ready, please get hold of some notebook and a pen. Be very much ready. I'm going to start my lecture on the change of narration. Here we go. Change of narration. My dear students, look at this sentence. I read it for you. She said, comma, inverted commas begin. I respect you and your family. Full stop and inverted commas closed. Whenever a sentence is given in this form, it has two distinct parts. One that lies outside the inverted commas and whose purpose is to present a report or to quote something. This part of the sentence is called the reporting speech. And then inside the inverted commas lies the second part of the sentence, which contains the words actually spoken by the original speaker. This part of the sentence is called the reported speech. So, she said, comma, inverted commas begin, I respect you and your family, inverted commas closed, is a sentence which has been given in the direct narration. The direct narration will always have two parts: the reporting speech that gives the report and the reported speech, which is the report. And when we convert this sentence into its corresponding indirect narration, there can be a few changes that we have to understand in the very first instance. The indirect narration of this given sentence is this. I read it for you. She said that she respected me and my family. Did you notice that when we have converted the sentence, she said, comma, inverted commas begin, I respect you and your family, inverted commas closed, into its corresponding indirect narration, we have actually received a complex sentence. Now the sentence is not bifurcated into two distinct parts. Rather, in this case, we have got a complex sentence which has a principal clause followed by a subordinate clause, and it is very easy to understand by comparison of the original sentence in the direct narration and its corresponding indirect narration that the reporting speech has now become the principal clause and the reported speech has now become the subordinate clause. Usually, the reported speech becomes the subordinate clause, but there are a few exceptions, and we will understand those exceptions when we move further on this road. Dear students, to further understand the change of narration, the first step now onwards is that first of all you have to revise your understanding about the kinds of sentence. You know that there are four kinds of the sentence: a declarative sentence, an interrogative sentence, an imperative sentence, and ultimately, lastly, the exclamatory sentence. So, here is the time to first of all go through all these four kinds of the sentence one by one with the help of examples. As I have told you, that there are four kinds of sentences, which are declarative sentence or assertive sentence. Number two, interrogative sentence or question. Number three, imperative sentence. And number four, exclamatory sentence. Now, with the help of examples for each one of these kinds of sentence, I would further clarify your concept about the kinds of sentence. Without understanding these kinds of the sentence, it would not be easy for you, and you will not feel satisfied while learning the rules of the change of narration. So, first of all, let's get a clearer idea of what different types of sentences or what different kinds of sentences are there in English language. First of all, the declarative or assertive sentences, and here are the examples. Najam is a police officer. A declarative sentence, for your reminder once again, is a sentence whose purpose is to give some information, whose purpose is to inform. And this is the first example in this case. Najam is a police officer. One more example is Danish has won a gold medal. Again, this sentence gives some information. That's why it is classified as a declarative sentence. There is another example which says, we are moving in the right direction. You can understand the purpose of this sentence is also to give some information. There is one more example which is, we are not moving in the right direction. The information may be positive or it may be negative. In the fourth example, the information is basically negative, and so is the case in example number 5. The sentence is, he did not complete his homework. The declarative or assertive sentence contains a piece of information. That piece of information may be positive or negative, no problem. And now, the next kind of the sentence, an interrogative sentence or a question. And when we talk about the questions, we divide questions into two categories, calling them simple questions and complex questions. This is not a universal terminology for interrogative sentences, but for our understanding, we can utilize these names for either category of two different types of questions. So, first of all, I give you a few examples of simple questions. Example number 1, is it raining? Question mark. Example number 2, have you done the work? Question mark. And example number 3, did you watch this movie? Question mark. Please keep in your mind that every time a question that starts with the helping verb or the auxiliary verb, which is then followed by the subject of the sentence, and then the remaining part of the verb is there to be followed, if necessary, by other elements of the sentence, ending at a question mark, will be the simple question. Important thing that the simple question would be starting with the auxiliary verb. But then I give you three examples of the questions of the other type, which I may call complex questions. Example number 1, how did he fail? Question mark. Example number 2, why are you crying? Question mark. Example number 3, where is your father? Question mark. It is very easy to understand the clear cut difference between these two different types of question. When the first type of question, which I call simple question, is starting with the auxiliary verb, The second type of question is actually not starting with the auxiliary verb, and you can easily understand that instead it is starting with some word of interrogation, which is a word belonging to the WH family. How, why, when, where. So the structure of this sentence is that instead of the auxiliary verb being the first word of the sentence, it is basically the word from the WH family, which is the word of interrogation. And the remaining structure of the complex question is the same as the structure of the simple question. In future, we will understand that we deal with two different types of questions in two different ways while converting the sentences in the direct narration containing either of these two different types of questions. And now the third kind of sentences, we call them imperative sentences. In case of imperative sentences, you have to understand there are four subcategories of imperative sentences. Number one, commands or orders. Number two, requests. Number three, pieces of advice. And number four, proposals or suggestions. Now, with the help of some examples, I will try to further clarify your concept about each one of these subcategories of imperative sentences. First of all, I will take up the commands or orders, and here are the examples. Number one is open the door. This is definitely a command or an order. Example number two, stop here. Example number three, be punctual. Example number four, do not make a noise here. And example number five, never trust a stranger. There can be a positive order as we have seen in the first three examples, and there can be a negative order as we have seen in the last two examples. And please keep in your mind that whenever we are talking about an imperative sentence, it has a unique structure, which means that the very first word in case of an imperative sentence is usually the verb in its root form, which may then be followed by an object or alternatively an adverb or adverbial, or in some cases a complement. For example, in the first example, which is open the door, the verb in its root form, which is open, has been followed by an object, that is the door. In the second example, the verb in its root form is being followed by an adverbial, which is a word that tells us about the place of action here. And in the third example, the verb be, which is a verb in its root form, is followed by a complement, punctual. Sometimes, instead of a verb in its root form, the first word can be an adverb. And now I give you a few examples of the second subcategory of an imperative sentence. In this case, this category involves requests. And here is the first example. Excuse me. Everybody can understand that this is definitely a request. Example number two is pardon me. Similarly, example number three is have mercy on me. Example number four is please give me some money. And example number five is help me please. It is very easy to understand that all of these sentences contain a request. And always keep in your mind that because requests are also imperative sentences, so they have also the same structure as the structure of other imperative sentences, which is the sentence starts with the root form of the verb to be followed in some cases by an object, and in some other cases by an adverbial, or in some cases by a complement. And sometimes, instead of starting with the root form of the verb, the sentence starts with an adverb, and then the remaining structure remains the same. And for this structure, example number 4 is the right case. Instead of starting with the verb, which is give, the sentence actually starts with an adverb, which is please. And now, the third subcategory of imperative sentences. In this case, we are talking about pieces of advice. And here are the examples. Number 1 is take care of your health. This sounds more often of a piece of advice than a command or a request. Please keep in your mind that all imperative sentences will have the same structure, and it would depend on the mind of the reader or the context to classify it as a piece of advice or a request or a command or order. Structure would be the same, but only the context or the right reader's mind can decide as to how to take this sentence. Example number 2 for this category is be nice to your children. Similarly, a third example is sleep early. Now, again, keep in your mind, if my father, for example, says the same thing to me in a sterner voice, sleep early, it may be taken as a command. But if my younger brother says the same thing to me, it may not be taken as a command, rather, it can be taken as a piece of advice. So, what I am explaining is that so far as the structure is concerned, it would be the same, but only the reader or the listener may classify the sentence to be a piece of advice or a command or even a request. And as I have already told you, that the structure of all these imperative sentences is the same, which is verb in its root form leads the sentence to be followed by, in some cases, object, in some cases, an adverbial, or in some cases, a complement. And alternatively, sometimes it is not the root form of the verb that leads the sentence, and actually it is an adverb, and the remaining structure then is the same. And now, the last category or subcategory of imperative sentences, which contains proposals or suggestions. And here is example number 1. Let us go for a walk. Example number 2. Let us not deceive ourselves. Example number 3. Let us stay away from this matter. Did you notice this thing? That in this case of imperative sentences, the structure is slightly different, and every time the sentence is starting with this clause, let us. Every time it is starting with the words let us. So we can, for our understanding, read its structure to be let us followed by the verb in its root form, then followed by object in some cases an adverbial, and in some cases a complement. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the next kind of sentences, I told you there are 4 kinds of sentences. If you have not forgotten all of them up till now, first one, declarative or assertive sentences. Second one, interrogative sentences or questions. Third one, imperative sentences. And now the fourth one, exclamatory sentences. And in case of exclamatory sentences, for our understanding, we can divide into 5 subcategories. Category number 1, I put some examples before you one by one, and then it would be easy for you to understand as to why we can classify these exclamatory sentences as one subcategory. This is the first example. Hurrah! Sign of exclamation. I have won the match. Example number two. Alas, our team lost the semi-final match. Example number three. Ah, sign of exclamation. I have turned old now. Example number four. Wow, we will get ice cream now. Keep one thing in your mind that this type of exclamatory sentence always starts with some interjection, and you know what interjections are. There is another subcategory of exclamatory sentences, which is a category in which the sentence is starting instead of an interjection, it is starting with some swear words like this sentence: curse it, sign of exclamation, my flight has been cancelled. Curse it, my flight has been cancelled. One more example: damn it, I have lost the way. A third example: hang it, the kids have created a mess. The fourth example: blast it, the police have blocked the road. Everybody can understand that the distinctive mark in this category is the sentence is starting with expressions like curse it, damn it, hang it, blast it, which are called swear words. And now a third subcategory of exclamatory sentences. I put some examples before you one by one. First one comes here. May you live long, sign of exclamation. A second example, God bless our home. A third example, get well soon. A fourth example, God be with you. And lastly, one example, heaven help us. Easy, very easy to understand that in this case, we are considering those sentences which contain a prayer. So, all the prayers which were previously called optative sentences are now simply called the exclamatory sentences, and every time there would be sign of exclamation at the end of such a sentence. And the next subcategory of exclamatory sentences, ladies and gentlemen, comprises sentences of this type. Number one, what a beautiful garden! Sign of exclamation. One more example, what a shot! Another example is, what a mess! A fourth example is, how long your hair is. And one last example to understand this category is, how stupid. Keep in your mind as a common factor of all these sentences that they contain a powerful feeling of wonder, surprise, admiration, or annoyance. And now, the last category of exclamatory sentences, which I call as the miscellaneous exclamatory sentences, belonging to one category but having certain differences among themselves. Miscellaneous sentences. Examples can be happy birthday to you, sign of exclamation, many happy returns of the day, sign of exclamation, Merry Christmas, sign of exclamation, happy anniversary. One more example can be welcome to the city of lights. Another example can be good luck. And lastly, thank you. These are sentences which are used for greetings or wishes, etc. Now we have revised the different kinds of sentences along with their subcategories. And please keep in your mind that our concepts about the change of narration would never be complete if we do not understand and if we are not in a position to identify all these different kinds of sentences according to the need and according to their use in the direct speech.